We think. There we are. All right, I will call the meeting to order at 4:17. We have an agenda before us. Are there any additions or deletions? Anybody? There is typically a bad question, but seeing none, take a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Shannon, all in favor? Very. We also have the minutes of last week's meeting. Short and simple. Did anybody spot anything you wanted to comment on in those minutes? If not, I'll take a motion to adopt the minutes as presented.
I'll make the motion.
Hello, all in favor? Carried. Old business, none, new business. We have a development permit application before us. Application 2025-04, lot 10, block 1, plan 8922318. A variance on a number of issues, actually. We will leave that to Alicia if you have any comments before we jump into it.
No, I'll just quickly highlight the variances. So it's a single detached house in Lower West Peace, towards the south end of that neighborhood in the cul-de-sac. And it requires 3 variances to proceed. One to the building height. They're proposing 3 stories and 11.42 meters, which exceeds our maximum of 10.67 meters, or 2 stories, whichever is greater. There is a restrictive covenant on the property, which you can see on the drawing. Figure 4, the shaded area there shows the majority of the property that is affected by the restrictive covenant, and that restrictive covenant limits placing any permanent development in that area. So there are constraints in terms of where on the site they can place that building. And obviously the topography of the site itself also creates some constraints. This area does have multiple 2-story dwellings that are relatively tall, but still not as tall as this would be. We did circulate this to the fire department to see if they had any concerns related to fire protection for the building of this height, but they did not. So given the number of taller residential buildings in the area, and the lack of any other concern, we propose that it's reasonable to provide that variance. The land use bylaw also includes a regulation that prohibits new basements in Lower West Peace to deal with the water issues that are in that neighborhood. But because of the topography of the site and the proposal, the proposal would build the building into the ground a little bit. That basement would be a little bit below the natural grade, but not below the street that's right there next to it, that's providing access. And we did circulate the application to BC Hydro for any comment from them about a variance. And they were supportive of a variance for this property and this proposed development at this location. And they made it clear, not a blanket approval of doing that throughout the rest of the neighborhood, but given the circumstances of this site, a reasonable variance.
Do you typically ask them for their comments?
We not typically, but in this case, we do have documentation between BC Hydro and the town with respect to this land use regulation in the land use bylaw. So we didn't want to bring forward a variance without at least giving them an opportunity to provide comment. Ultimately, they're not the decider,
Right.
but we wanted to see if they had any particular concerns they wanted to raise to us. And they did not for this one. And then lastly, the parking hard surfacing requirement, which we've discussed a few times at the MPC recently. They do propose to have a concrete pad where the predominantly parking would be, but the driveway up to that would be gravel. 91st Street in this location is gravel. So it seems like a reasonable variance since the road it's connecting
Is
to
it
is
even
also
a variance? Because it's coming off gravel. So
it's a variance to the regulation, but it's the way the regulation is written. I think it is a variance, but I think it's a very reasonable one to grant. So our recommendation is to grant all 3 variances and approve the the application.
So I do have a question. So this is basically a walkout and so how much of the foundation of that is below grade? Like, I mean, it slopes from the back, I get that.
Mhm. Yeah.
But because it's at grade on the street level, does that not negate that? Like, it's not really a basement, the way I see it. You got three floors above grade,
Mhm.
you know, with some backfill against the back end of the house, basically.
Yeah, but it says the regulation itself is no habitable portion of a building, including a basement, shall be below the natural or existing ground elevation. So
Right.
it, whether or not this is a basement, a
Yeah.
portion of the habitable building is below grade towards the rear of that bottom story.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And the other question I had on this is, like, that thing is pretty uptight against the property line on one side, and it's obvious, has to be because of the, like you say, the lot itself.
Mhm.
And the height difference, what's the height difference between them and the house that's there on that, your neighboring house? Are these guys gonna be peering down into the other guy's backyard?
I mean, the majority of the windows are facing out into the cul-de-sac, so a lot of the overlook
Oh, I see.
will be to either the rear or the front. There are a couple side windows, but not very many.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and in terms of, I believe, I could quickly just pull it up, but I believe the closest adjacent house is one of the ones that's over 9 meters in height, but I can also just quickly pull up the web map and we can double check that.
And it looks like the side of their house doesn't have too much window on it,
No.
picture on the neighbor's house and, so.
And those are lots of taller duplexes in there, right?
Yeah.
So like things are, like the overall sight line or roof lines in there are, I would say, very close to your 10.5 meters, are they not?
Well, the tallest house is, I think, 9.22 meters based on this. This layer.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, that's the wrong one. Here we go. This one is based on the layer here, 9.0 meters in elevation. So it's one of the taller houses in the neighborhood, but not the tallest.
And it's at the end of the cul-de-sac too.
Well, and if it's starting, like, if that height is starting slightly below grade, it might not, am I understanding that correctly, that it wouldn't be necessarily as like taller than other houses, depending on where they're
So the height that we're looking at is from the
grade.
the basement found it like,
Oh, okay,
it's
okay.
the tallest version of that. So when
Okay.
you're on the front of the building where you're at the ground level to
Oh, okay.
the top of the house.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yes, go right ahead, no, please.
Mr. Walton was kind enough in his letter drafted January 30 to inform somebody that your analysis and reasons for the variance are all appropriate. I must have appreciated reading that. On the second, on the last page, paragraph 2, says I applied for a roadside development permit over the transportation date provided. I have not heard a response back yet. Is that anything we have to worry about?
No, so we make
Yeah,
sure,
we have it now.
Pardon?
We have the roadside development permits now.
Maybe not. Is that something we have to worry about or not?
there was no special conditions, so we would worry about it if AT had specified some specific conditions that they are depending on us to help enforce, because they don't have very positive enforcement powers.
They hadn't responded, we'd be concerned. They have responded, and they don't have a concern, so we're not concerned.
That's right.
Does that show up in the material anywhere?
No, we did not attach the roadside development permit.
Went through
But it is-
quickly, I didn't see it, but.
Yeah, it is
I
in
accept
the-
it's there.
Yeah, we do have it in the file.
I don't need to see it, I just,
Okay.
if it's there, it's there.
Is there any other questions or comments regarding this application? Does anybody have any other things they want to note?
General question, how long does BC Hydro take to respond? Are they pretty good?
They didn't take, well, they took a few weeks.
Pardon?
They took a few weeks.
Uh,
We gave them a deadline. They met it.
I find it pretty interesting. Somebody here has to have somebody there
Yeah.
for a comment.
We didn't have to,
Yeah, no,
but
I understand that,
yeah.
but I find it interesting that.
Yeah. Well, it's because BC Hydro does own and operate the dewatering wells in Lower West Peace, and there has been
I find that interesting.
a number of agreements back and forth between the town and that organization related to it.
I would think some little issue like this to BC Hydro with their own problems wouldn't really be at the top of their priority list.
Well, they got somebody there that sits on their desk for a while, and they take a look at it, sure. They have made it clear they want to be involved.
That is like, so, yeah, that's small, hey, like
Footprint?
the actual
Yeah, it's only like. What did it say,
400
four hundred square feet. Like,
Yeah. It is a pretty small footprint.
it's like, is it worth, I don't like to say, it, I agree, it's like, is it worth the bother, like, where you wouldn't, I don't know, like, if you're gonna. You're gonna go through all the hassle, but fair enough, it's there.
I think the intent of this thing, if we read this right, is gonna be a rental unit slash Airbnb.
That's what it
Proposal?
kind of.
That's, yeah. I think they will be looking to rent it. Yeah.
Well, I feel like. They're not violating the spirit of any of the. Regulations, if you get what I'm saying, like the numbers, or some of the. The height, it's a little higher, but it still isn't like,
I think the other thing you keep in mind, the height is gonna be very disguised by the background.
Yeah.
It's that hill, right? You're not gonna see, it's not like it's sticking out there by itself out in the middle of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, when you drive up that street, you can see like buildings don't really look that tall until you're like walking up the steps to one of them, you're like, well, this thing.
That's a third step for me.
Yeah.
yeah, like I feel like it's still gonna fit the.
Yeah.
The impression of the neighborhood, that kind of thing, like, it's not gonna obviously be like, well, clearly they got a variance for something, like, I don't feel like anyone driving by would have that impression.
Well, and-
To see it.
And Lower West is so mixed to begin with, like you've got duplexes, you've got trailers, you've got like, like we're talking obviously this very specific cul-de-sac, but like the area in general is quite mixed, so.
Yeah,
Great.
it maintains the inconsistency.
Well, we were talking about that with frontage just the other day. wasn't
Yeah,
it?
exactly. We were.
Or setback rather.
Okay, if there's no other discussion, I would take a motion to, either adopt or reject. And we can take it from there.
You have the wording of that in here somewhere that
Page 9.
no.
So we have submitted the one, or have provided the one condition that we would want to add to the approval. Just kind of our standard. Additional condition.
Is that subject to potential conditions, you mean that phrase?
Yes.
And those would be ones that you would dream of?
No, it's the one that's just above. The development must conform to the site plan submitted on February 3rd.
Okay.
Yeah.
I could read that. I move we approve single detached dwelling on lot 10, block 1, plan 8922318, subject to the potential conditions.
All in favor?
You just, before, question or comment? Sure. A couple of meetings ago, I'd made a suggestion for an amendment. And I think some people might have thought it was kind of ridiculous because it incorporated into, whoever made, I think Don made the motion and he incorporated into the motion what I thought would be an amendment. Way back when Ms. Who should be?
Martineau?
Martineau, and I've been here that long, but somebody would say, I make the motion, incorporate my number or something. And she said, somebody suggested to her that, should have the exact words. I misunderstood her because I thought she was saying should amend the documentation to have the exact words, so we read from the documentation. And I don't know why, but I was assuming then we could go back later and look at the material. So yeah, that was the recommendation as amended. Apparently I misunderstood her on that because we're not doing that. And I accept that, but I thought that was the reasoning for it. But along the same line, the addition, I think, should be read in completely if there was any merit to her comment some time ago. Again, I just mentioned that. I really didn't know the reasoning.
So therefore, the motion would say, subject to the condition that the development must be conformed to the site plan submitted on February 3rd, 2025.
I think that's consistent what the information she received.
Yeah.
Friendly amendment.
It should be. Friendly amendment. Accepted?
Absolutely.
Okay, all in favor? And Dawn, you can't vote.
I didn't hear enough of it.
What's that?
I didn't hear enough of it, so.
Pardon?
You can't vote. Yeah. got it. Okay, that takes care of that. Reports and information, we have the monthly development report, which is attached to the back of the package we received. It basically just goes through what's going on, what's happening, what's looking forward to coming up. Anybody have any comments or questions on any of those activities? We can put forward to our administration and they'll hopefully be able to give us some answers.
Is this a new procedure then, up at the back or?
Yes, we've started attaching those or providing those to council for every month, their party and governance meeting, and then we're just attaching the same report.
Heads up?
Yeah, exactly.
So, just the indoor participation recreation service application we had until February 28th. to Provide more information. Was that received?
No,
So is that file being closed?
We'll be following up to see
Yeah.
if they want to enter into a time extension before we close it. Yeah. We did meet with them to talk about what we needed and they seemed willing to do it at that time, so I don't want to close it prematurely.
Right. Doesn't hurt to give them the last chance, I guess.
Yeah.
What's the weightlifting or exercise or whatever?
It is, yeah. Okay.
Anybody have any comments on any of the other?
Or we're not seeing number 3 there yet because they haven't got it.
We are working on drafting an MPC report, so it'll be coming very shortly.
Good night for another meeting.
Yeah.
That will start at 4:15.
One that almost made it in the door, is it here?
Yeah, that's the other house, the other single detached dwelling. Four.
Thank you.
No, sorry, three made it in the door, four.
Just
No.
addressed.
We just did 4 and 3 will be coming to an MPC meeting very soon.
There you
Comments, questions? If not, then we can move on to the land use bylaw draft review, which we started here a week ago. Planning missed out on a whole bunch of stuff,
I did.
so I'm sure she has a whole bunch of questions. If she's gonna flash them there on this.
Every time she says something, we're gonna pretend that we talked about it already. Have a whole lot last night. That
No.
was different.
Mhm. Hopefully we capture all of the important things here and
Yeah, most of what the mayor brought up, she clearly done her homework, was grammatical and
That's like my document.
we're getting those from multiple angles, so hopefully we'll catch them all by the end.
Is there anything of significance that anybody wants to bring up? We do have a few more points to point out, but, they did a lot of talking last week. I'd like to leave that to anybody else who has any questions or comments or things that you'd like to direct to administration.
we kind of ended on the CCAN discussion. And knowing that we were coming back and kind of what you had indicated was that things should be at least the same color.
Mhm.
I was wondering how that might look for a potential similar finish in terms of like. Because I've seen the CCAN inside sort of a shed to a degree, so
Mhm.
it's got the security and mouse proof and waterproofedness of the CCAN, but also none of the exposed, metal. That, I know that would be a much more onerous than just painting it the same color. Is that something that we as a group would like to discuss at all, or do we think that's extra and silly?
Are we, sorry, I just want to ask, did we say it has to be the same color?
That was kind of what you had indicated in the
It's either matches or is complementary to.
complimentary, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't really have to be the same color, it's like.
Yeah.
Like some, ultra modern color stacked house, and then we've got like a
So,
bright green shipping container next to it, kind of, well, maybe not a house, because that'd be residential, but.
I'm colorblind, Amos. You could tell me it's complimentary. You tell me it's complimentary, I'm like, sure is.
What page is that on again?
123 is the section that we're talking about.
I just wanted to put a bow kind of on this part.
Yeah.
Because we sort of ended on it.
There's a particular house in town that stands out. It might have been developed about the time we got sunny ways in Canada. You might know the house. I would recommend we not have a CCAN the same color.
Mhm.
Yeah, the better.
I guess my question about, or my concern with trying to regulate that too much is that CCANs are also very much into the commercial, well, that's where they are. in the
Yeah.
Commercial industrial areas, right?
Mhm.
And depending on the commercial or industrial, more industrial particularly, are not necessarily aesthetically pleasing in most cases anyway.
Right.
Or some of them are. So, I mean, I don't know how you could use a judgmental criteria on what they have to do with it.
To keep it aesthetically,
Mhm.
unless it just gets kicked back here every single time that someone wants to use shipping container, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's gonna be,
I don't think that that's the purpose.
no.
And, I guess some loose wording around it has to be maintained in a sightly manner is basically all you
Yeah.
can say.
Okay. And I am open. I did, that's why I brought it forward. I was looking for that feedback.
sorry, for my clarification, are you looking at, when you say not having a CCAN policy, it's like, but your comment about that, which is kind of like, are we saying to a degree, no CCANs?
No,
Then if we don't have something, it's like saying no big balloons. Well, if you don't have a big balloon policy and somebody puts a big balloon somewhere, now you're into. Why'd you put that big balloon there? Well, nobody told me I couldn't put a big balloon there. And that's where I see the issue. If you don't have something, then you have.
Yeah, I think we're all in
Everything.
agreement, this is, I think we're all like thinking
Huh?
this. I think we all think it's good to have some sort of restriction here, and that's why it's opening it up so that people could do it, but having some guidelines for it.
Yeah, it might,
which I can see, but the terminology of similar color or complementary, using whose color wheel,
Mhm.
using whose idea of aesthetics, and
yeah.
I mean,
and
you should,
that-
I mean, basically, you don't want a rusty hunk of tin.
Yeah, yes,
And I mean, I think that that's it. And in backyards, for example, and I'm not sure that they're as offensive in a backyard on a back alley as they are in a front yard beside somebody's house or in their driveway on the front yard, so.
Remember, we're not doing
They're not-
CCANs in residential.
yeah, it's a
It
specific
can't be in
to,
residential.
specific to commercial riverfront development. One RD.
So-
CR.
If I'm, based on what I'm hearing, right now, the regulation says the exterior finish of a shipping container sited within a commercial district must be consistent with or complementary to the finish of the principal building. What I'm hearing is maybe we update this so that it shall be
Painted.
rust-free. And I don't know exactly what the right word is, but something along the lines of like a properly finished. Do we care if some CCANs come with words on the side of them? Do we want to say no to that? It's got to be like a clean.
I think in good repair, like the rust issue, same as
Yeah.
you don't want a rust bucket car,
Mm.
in certain areas. But I think it's more that than it is the color or the fact that it says
You know
some
what?
shipping company.
Because I can see a business or a company wanting their logo on the side, right?
Mhm.
So if you start saying it's gotta be free of,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
so I don't think you wanna restrict that. If it's part of their corporate image, then as long as it's, I think John's right, as long as you say that it's rust-free and in good maintenance, then that's good enough. And then again, if our bylaw officer gets a bunch of complaints about some guy's rusty thing,
yeah.
he can always go back to them and say, okay, look, this says you gotta maintain it.
Mhm. Okay,
One thing, last thing, we can move on next, but the shipping containers can come up to like 54 feet long.
Mhm.
Might be something we wanna put a comment on there, like if I put a 54-foot shipping container across the south side of the brewery, everyone's gonna notice that, and it's not gonna look too pleasant. Just as do we wanna put like a 20-foot shipping container limit or something, cause like if. I've seen 20s, and then you can hit high cans too, I don't think that's really an issue, the height wise, cause I mean, you already got a limit for that, so that's great, but.
Mhm.
Is that something we wanna put in there? I think it might be wise if we start having.
So we're allowing up to two, right?
Well, that was, what we had talked about last day was reducing that to one.
Yeah,
In the
In the
commercial,
downtown.
in the downtown.
In the
Yeah.
downtown, I can see.
yeah.
If you're up in the industrial park. Does it matter if a guy's got two of them? And like you say, if
No.
you're gonna put a length restriction on them, maybe the guy maybe it suits him better to have a 40-footer than 220s.
You're right, yeah. Heck, a lot cheaper. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mhm.
So can you just put at the discretion of you guys?
The development authority for,
Or do we want to do that?
Well, listen, you guys have a good eye for aesthetics and I trust you to do it if you would want that
Mhm.
responsibility. Cause sometimes it's nice to be able to say, hey, we pass it to the group said it was good, it's good.
well, and we
And they could do
We
that
do have that
regardless-
ability to,
Regardless.
yeah.
If it comes to them.
to punch
Some
upwards,
guys-
yeah,
See, I don't see this happening
often.
very
Yeah,
often,
yeah, I
right?
agree. Yeah.
So leave it as open as you can,
Yeah.
and then if somebody does want to be a bit of a pain,
Mm,
you have the ability to make a decision or pass it back here,
mm.
right?
Yeah.
Now, is that available to you with what you have here now?
Well, so just thinking through the application process. if someone has a permitted use in the C1 or any of the.
Yep.
The, uses,
RV or CR.
yeah, any of the downtown area, that means that the accessory buildings are also permitted. So as long as they're meeting the regs, then it's permitted. So
Right.
as long as they can fit, if they wanted to do a 40-foot, 54-foot CCAN, as long as they wanted to do that on their site, they could fit it on their site and not contravene any of the other regs. We wouldn't really have if there's no length maximum, then we don't have something to prohibit that. They'd be able to do it.
If they couldn't build a shed that big, they can't use a sea can that big. Basically.
Yes, exactly. But otherwise they could.
Mhm.
As long as they're meeting the other requirements.
Mhm.
Again, you've got I'm back to the shipping container you've got a clause right in here, so they have to meet all these clauses, right?
Yeah.
And your clause here says shipping container must be well maintained in good condition, or it must be adequately buffered, you know, to the satisfaction of the development authority, so it already says you have that
Yeah.
ability.
And I'm happy with that wording if the rest of the group is.
Yeah, there you go.
So we're not saying anything about length. We've decided that's not necessary.
I don't think well. Your comment,
I just thought it was important to bring up because I do know that I mean. But again, there's a process still,
Mhm.
right? So if it's like, hey, like Tyrell, I don't think you should put a 53-foot shipping container across the end of the parking lot because of other reasons anyways, right?
Mhm.
So it's not necessarily gonna be just because of the shipping container itself, but well, you can't do all this or you can't do,
Yeah, I mean, there'd be corner triangle, site triangle issues potentially. I mean, on
Yeah.
your site probably.
yeah,
Yeah.
but just, using that site as an example,
Mhm.
I can only think of one orientation where one would be in some way, but.
so. They're gonna look for a, development agreement to place this container, right? Is that,
Sorry, say that again?
they're gonna look for a development
Permit?
permit?
Yeah.
So there'll be a discussion before they do it, or they're gonna submit an application.
They'd submit an application and if they meet the requirements of the bylaw, then they'd get their permit.
Well, if there's an issue with respect to length, it'd be easy enough to fit it in 8123C. Where the development authority has discretion with respect to the number. It could be the length.
We could put number and size.
Mhm.
Then that falls back again on you having that choice, right?
So 2 is okay. If you could build a shed that was 2 shipping containers wide. Then 2 can go side by side and that's okay. Kind of idea?
250-foot shipping container.
Well, but if you couldn't build a 50-foot shed,
I
you can't
know.
use it. So if
Yeah.
you couldn't build how wide is shipping container? 8 feet?
Yeah, 8 or 9, depends on.
You know, so if you could have a 16-foot shed that's 40 feet wide, you can use 2 8-foot shipping containers that are 40 feet. That's your wide ball.
Yeah, and we got you. Yeah, seems reasonable, yeah.
If you captured those restrictions somewhere else, then
I mean, there's still requirements around just the maximum amount of area that can be covered by accessory buildings in general.
Yeah,
You still have to meet your setback,
that's right.
all those sorts of things.
Yeah, so our other concern should be caught. There's gonna be one thing that happens at some point.
And you can only have an accessory building on a site if you have a principal building, so. There's a limited amount of room.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you should not be. There might be a few examples where this isn't true, but. Going forward, you don't have a principal building on your site. Then you don't get to put a shed on that property. Beforehand.
I'm happy. Me too. Next issue. Yep, in my opinion. I'm good. Done with that one.
Okay, so we are putting, just so I'm clear, we want to propose a length restriction or not? We're just keeping the language as is.
The length is restricted in other means.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Be a lot
so we
easier-
don't need to
You don't need to double.
specifically,
Be a
okay,
lot easier
Thank you.
just to walk through them
yeah.
instead of like. Were you reading that out?
Yeah. Well, you still have to meet, even if we add it, you still have to meet the site requirements, those things still come into play.
Although if you're looking at a CCAN, it would only be here. Yeah.
Mhm.
I personally would avoid putting in blank.
Mhm.
Let the applicant propose what they want to do.
Yeah.
If you put up to a maximum of 40 feet or 45 feet, every application is gonna be a 45 foot CCAN.
Mhm.
Whereas they might be 20 otherwise, right? The
Yeah.
guy's gonna say, well,
Big cost difference between,
maybe.
Is
or
it,
not.
is it worthwhile putting a line in there that says, you know, basically refer to other site requirements?
I don't think.
No, because you'd be doing that every
You're
single,
doing that every time?
every spot in the bylaw, you'd be doing
Right.
that. Yeah.
So,
If-
and
if
this is-
we-
That's covered in.
if they
your
don't do
general-
their homework, they don't do their homework.
That's covered in your
Yeah.
general
Okay, fair
comments
enough.
at the beginning of the bylaw, that you must meet all other
Right.
criteria.
So if somebody comes along and says, I went and bought myself a CCAN, 100 foot CCAN, I wanna stick it here, too bad, you made the decision before you looked.
Yeah,
Mhm.
It's
basically.
not our problem. Okay, fair enough.
although if nobody complains.
Huh?
No one catches it.
Well, that's part of the thing is that if it's based on complaint rule, and if nobody complains, then there is no rule.
It often is. That being said, if someone is coming to us for an application, we're not going to approve something that's inconsistent with the bylaw. But we are also getting to a place organizationally where enforcement is happening more consistent, so
Right.
more consistently.
You can just.
What's the next big issue we wanna tackle in this document that we haven't already touched on, and that we wanna revisit?
Well, I'm just personally kind of wondering if, because we kind of talked about the districts last time and the uses, but we didn't really get into the general regulations, so part 3 in general, I mean, we did when we talked about CCANs. And I just wonder if you kind of want to walk through that section and see if there's anything that is coming up for anybody that we want to bring up.
Ready to begin?
Yeah, so it starts at page 105.
A couple stickies on here. Hold on for a bit. I got into you a little bit was your landscaping screening section there.
Right, so that's
On page
over.
109. Revisions, 792, provision of site landscaping and permanent obligation development permit, the landscaping must be installed and maintained to no less than the standards set by the approved landscaping plan. Again, is there gonna be an enforcement on that? I mean, I drive around and I see things where people have been forced to put a tree up, whatever. There's 3 spruce trees, one of them's dead, 2 of them are okay.
Mhm.
Do we go back to the guy and say, hey, your tree's dead, it's been 3 years and it's died? Is this enforceable?
Mhm.
If we're gonna put that, is that the intent?
It,
Do we have the ability to do that?
yeah. That's the intent, that it gives us a stronger footing to enforce.
Then again, if you flip over onto 110, you get into the 1 tree thing. Are you happy with that? That every lot development, when they're going stepping forward, will have a tree.
And I will be bringing the results from their survey as well, because that's one of the questions specific in the survey. And there's definitely some people who like it, but there's also some who don't. And I am wondering if there are,
Is there an option you can get other than a tree?
yeah.
And depending on what the person wants to do with their landscaping,
Mhm.
I think you have to give them some other option.
It's funny how this one has become one of the ones people talk about is a tree,
Mhm.
you know, and I can see it. Some people like a straight grass front yard.
Yeah.
And now you're saying, well, you gotta have a tree.
Mhm.
And they're going, I want a straight grass, I wanna mow my lawn.
Mhm.
I don't wanna have to work around a tree forever for the next 100 years.
Or have to worry about the pipes that are built.
And, you know, every other thing that comes along, I mean, I get it on both sides, this is my, I'm. This one's rubbing people to a degree because it's a friction point. You
Mhm.
know, it's a point where people don't see eye, there's people who think that basically we shouldn't have houses. I mean, if you wanna go to the extreme, we shouldn't build houses any larger than we absolutely need because, for whatever reason. So you get into all those kinds of discussions, when you say somebody, you gotta have a tree, and the guy says, why? Well, because trees are good. You know,
Mhm.
good is, that's the standard. I don't know, I don't. I get the reasoning behind it, but I also not as comfortable with it, and I don't care for my own yard. I got trees, like, no big deal. But I could see a person saying, why are you forcing me to put a tree in? Yeah, and give me a logical reason why you want the tree. So if you ask.
Rhetorical question, of course.
Sorry,
Rhetorical question, of course.
it's a totally, yeah, but I'm saying, if somebody says to you, well, give me a reason why you're making this rule,
Mhm.
what road are you gonna go down?
Is it, what is the spirit of the law that we have a tree, or is that the front yard is not totally bare and that there is some sort of feature or something there to break up so the street is not just this hollow? What is the purpose of, is it the tree, or is it that there is a thing?
I mean, the tree has some certain kinds of benefits in terms of shade and things along those lines, which provides benefit to people as well as, I think, benefit to some infrastructure as well. But there are other options. I mean, from an aesthetic perspective, I think that you could argue that there are other ways to get to a nicer community standard than everybody having nothing
Yeah,
and just a tree. I know that further in the bylaw, in this section, we do talk about, and I forget exactly where it is, but there is an ability to reduce the number of trees required by replacing each tree with 2 shrubs. So we could potentially talk about adding some flexibility to this. So it's a tree or this, and then maybe there's also or some other.
front yard feature, like,
Yeah.
so for example, someone has one of those, I don't know if these are in vogue right now, like one of those little wishing well things in the front yard. So it's not a tree.
Yeah.
But it is a feature.
Where are wishing wells in vogue?
Well, yeah, well, look, I'm not the guy that decides that, I'm just,
Or somebody puts a large boulder out in their
Yeah,
front yard.
yeah.
Puts a
Or-
flag
Yeah.
Yeah.
a neighbor on the street has a lamp post in their
Mhm.
front yard.
Mhm.
That's lit, so there's a feature, there is something that has aesthetic value that kind of breaks up the,
A flock of flamingos.
oh boy.
See, that's the issue
Yeah.
with putting in
So-
something like that, because
Yeah.
everybody's got their own idea of what is a great thing to have in their front yard.
Yeah, and so and this is where I would rely on you to be able to wordsmith that into something that might make some sense to achieve what the spirit of the regulation is without being as restrictive as some tree.
Or nothing.
So.
Yeah.
Like you said, you're gathering a bunch of information. This one's obviously not gonna go away for a while.
Mhm.
Um, when we get done gathering all your information, are we gonna see the final product, obviously, back here or not? Or just through access to the town site when it's finalized?
So,
The survey?
No, the document. They're
Oh,
gonna take the information from that survey and they're gonna incorporate a bunch of it into this document that we may or may not have discussed.
Yeah.
So I guess my question was, are we gonna see the final thing before it goes to council?
If
Is that- is
everybody
that the-
promises to read it fully.
Is that the
If-
intent? Or is it just that you'll gather it all up and on such and such date, there'll be an announcement that says, we have a proposed thing that we're gonna send to the town council on such and such a date. It's on our website. Please review it if you have any more comments. Cutoff date is next Tuesday. Is that kind of the way it's gonna go?
we can bring it back to the MPC. It might mean calling a specific MPC meeting just to look at the land use bylaw one last time with the draft.
Is that something we want?
Well, the question comes to my mind, if it's gonna come back to us, to what purpose prior to it get ahead of the council for approval? If it's to make some final changes, comments, suggestions, then we're back where we are now.
Really, yeah. Okay.
So, and
You gotta keep in mind, I guess, that we are only one agency that's making comments. There's lots of other people involved. And we don't necessarily trump anybody else. We can make our recommendations to administration to present this to council. And hopefully they'll
well, that's,
incorporate
I
most of
think it's
them.
good to get the feedback from as many sources
Yeah,
as you
no, I
can.
agree.
What do they say? Too many cooks, no, but, seriously, you want a bunch of people looking at it. For a number of reasons. But the question is, that a lot of people could ask, or I could ask, is everybody looks at it, then it goes to you guys formulate it into something you present to council. I mean, ultimately, it's council's responsibility to say yay or nay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it has to come back unless there's a reason, and not against anything here, but every group could say, for example, you could have the chamber say, well, yeah, but after you put it together, are we gonna have a chance to look at the final product? And the answer is, why? What are you expecting to do with it prior to it being passed if it's the final product? If it's the final product, it kind of is what it is unless it's passed or not passed, or passed with amendments.
Mhm. And I guess I expect to bring it to council with a bunch of changes. There will be changes, and then there might be a couple of spots where it's these are options for how to change it. And what is council, where does council want to go with it? I think that this one might be one.
One thing I haven't been able to sort of ascertain, and maybe because I haven't asked it directly, is there a finish line date that this has to be done by? And my suspicion is no, because we have a bylaw.
Mhm. No, there isn't a must be done by, we're gunning for June because we'd really like to work with the new bylaw. The reality of a bylaw like this is that it's possible that we're gonna miss something. And for instance, the city of Edmonton did an overhaul of their land use bylaw. And within 6 months, and they had spent like years and many planners and many, I don't know how many people working on that. Within 6 months, they did an amending bylaw that was basically the whoopsie bylaw. The whoopsie. We didn't address this in the new bylaw. We need it in there.
And I can
Looking at-
see that happening because until the actual document's out there, people have to use it. And then
Yeah.
they say, well, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Well, you had a chance to comment on that. Yeah, but you didn't really think I was gonna read that, did you?
Yeah,
You know, which is exactly the way it
Yeah.
works.
Exactly.
And the other part is you get somebody who comes up against the wall that's in that whatever bylaw. And it actually doesn't make sense in that case.
Yeah.
With all the greatest minds in the world, it looked like it made sense up until that day. If somebody comes along with the new tack on it or the new approach. So. And maybe that's something that should be clarified too, is that once a bylaw is in place, it's not like
It's not good.
it's like a budget. It's not a law that you have that can't be moved. It's not a line that can't be altered. There's nothing that can't be modified. And I think that's some of the fear sometimes is that this is so final and there's no recourse or no discussion after the decision. I think that's something that would make me as a developer or a builder kind of nervous about having it set in stone.
Mhm.
If I think that I can run this, because I may not know enough in any area to know what I'm gonna run into until I get there.
Mhm.
I don't know.
that's why the variance process exists. It exists today and it'll exist when this bylaw is in effect as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a combination of the two. We probably will want to do an amending bylaw to fix the things that inevitably come up, but also,
Try and get it right as much as you can.
yeah, but I do see, I think, a couple of questions to council on. This is what we've received on this topic. Where do you guys want to land?
The other thing I'd like to hear is from your end of it, what areas you are feeling you'd like other opinions on before we're finished with this. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm continuing with what we're doing, but I'd also like to hear that.
Well, this is definitely one of them, so, yeah.
Flip the page to 112 there and you get into your landscape securities.
Yeah.
Excuse me, you don't get for this. Probably not. Well, excuse me.
Okay, yeah, no, I probably should mark that down, so I.
Okay.
Let's do that. Okay, sorry, landscaping securities.
So again, I found it kind of mushy in a couple of spots as to what you can do with this security and what you can't.
Mhm.
I dealt with government contracts for years and we had all kinds of security
Mhm.
clauses. The one that kind of strikes me here is the release of security will be dependent on plant material being alive, thriving, and having consistently maintained over the previous 2-year growing seasons. So you've got a bylaw that basically says somebody has to landscape their property to a certain standard, regardless of what that standard is. They've got to maintain it for those 2 years up until then, otherwise you don't give their money back. Is basically what this is saying, or you don't have to. There's other places throughout this where it says after a year, if you feel comfortable, you can give it back, or, right? Or you can diminish it from full value to 10%.
Mhm.
I guess if I'm a developer, I'm gonna wanna know which one of those targets I'm gonna wanna hit. You know, if I can get 90% of my money back, I'm gonna do 90% of the work. And once I got my money back, you can eat that last 10%, because it's not worth my while to finish. That was a ongoing issue when we dealt with government contracts. Is they'll do it till they get the bulk of their money back. And then take that last 25% and do what you gotta do. You
Mhm.
need to replace 2 trees, you got the money, do it.
Right.
Typically, the money wasn't enough to hold back to do that.
Mhm.
In
Okay.
saying that, that's that's pretty standard. That's the way developers work, and I think that's the way most administrations see it happening,
Mhm.
if I'm not mistaken.
Is
So
that
again,
why-
these clauses you've got in here are here for a purpose, I get that. It's just that it's real easy to
Mhm.
step around a lot of that stuff, right? So
Okay,
whether it's to our benefit to try and really fine tune that and really make it tight to what, when and how much of your holdbacks you're gonna keep. I'm not sure. I just raised it as a point.
So that's why you mentioned last night that some municipalities go over 100% to capture.
Inflation and whatever else in 2 years, how
Mhm.
do you know what the cost of a elm tree is gonna be?
Yeah,
That is why some municipalities go more than 100% of the cost,
That
because
is also why developers scream and yell. So
Yes.
it depends, you know, weigh what you wanna hear, right?
so
Is it gonna be a big benefit to make sure you recoup it all, or?
to try, help me, what was your interpretation of the discussion at council last night? That it was the cash idea, that people would have funds tied up more, or that it was the 100% idea? Where do you think cause this did come up last night, so
Yeah.
what do you think the biggest sticking point was? The fact that I've got all my capital's now tied up in this stupid landscaping thing? Or that it was, oh, I could do a bond, I could do insurance or whatever these other things are.
Yeah.
But it should not be over 100%.
I
I
think
feel like
that,
there would be some pushback if it went over 100%, was my impression of the discussion.
I do think it would here. I think we'd have to experience the pain before we understood the value of going more than 100%.
Right.
Mhm.
Would you be willing, or I guess Mr. Good or myself would potentially be willing to go back, and this would be kind of to the group, to say it is the recommendation of the MPC that we go 125%, keep everything else the same. Council, do what you will, but the MPC feels this.
Mhm.
Like, would that be valuable feedback for council? And I'm not sure if that's the opinion of the group, I'm just saying, for instance.
Because, you know, when you're asking for more than the value of something
Mhm.
as a surety,
But is it, is
Well-
the other question, right?
well,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like if you don't have something to replace it with because someone didn't take care of it in the first place, then you're kind of. I mean, we charge like a deposit on our kegs at the brewery, that is much more than the keg is worth. Because otherwise people are like, well, look, I got a keg for $100.
it's $25 cake, yeah.
And it's like, and they don't, you know, now I don't have it and I need it. And then the town would be in the same place where it's like, hey, well, this is, and we have no funds to go in and do the thing now because the cost of everything, like I said, inflation or what have you, it might be, you know, maybe we can't even get something anymore.
I mean, I get it because of a lot of well, almost every law that you have was based on somebody didn't do what they should have done, and now you're codifying what they should do,
Yeah.
you know, and that's the pressure on both sides, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are developers that feel, well, why are you getting in the way of development? Well, the answer is 1,000 times, because there were shady developers, or there were developers who didn't build the code, didn't do this, didn't do that, didn't do 101 things. So we're just spelling it out ahead of time that we're gonna take a look, and you're gonna be under, you mean you're gonna be able to come into my building and take a look at it? Yeah, we are. Why?
Yeah.
Because there's no other way of knowing.
Might it depend on how we word this? If we were to say 100% plus 20% for inflation, or plus 20% for, you know, or
Contingency.
contingency, that's a good word, I like that word. So we're saying it is only our intent to collect the cost of it, should it not happen. And I think we could all recognize that with, at minimum, inflation would mean 100% isn't enough.
Mhm.
I don't think anyone could logically make that argument that no, 100% is enough. It's like, we all know it's not. It's just a question of how far off do we want the municipality to be?
Mhm. I can take that language back. This is a section where I will also be getting some legal feedback.
Right.
Yeah,
And I can broach that question with them.
but yeah, I agree with you. It should be.
Again, you know, this, like, I mean, that's whatever you're taking,
Mhm.
whether it's 100%, 125%, whatever. There are again, places in here that state that, you know, we're gonna hold that for 2 years. We're gonna hold that for a year and then we're gonna assess. And if we're happy after a year, we'll give you part of it back.
Yeah.
Um, So regardless of what you take, that is always in there, right? There's always gonna be those different options as to how long Byron's gonna hold my money. If I wanna get my money back, I gotta go do what they asked me to do. And if I play nice, they might give it back to me early. So it's a carrot and stick thing, right? Yeah, we're gonna take this, but you can have it back if you behave yourself and do right. So I think that that's built in.
Mhm.
But you have the option if somebody, let's say you say, I want landscape to this level, and the person goes really gung ho and does an absolutely wonderful job. Do you have the option in here to say, you've met your requirements of this, we're gonna give you 70% of it back at hole 20 or hole
Yes.
30, whatever?
Yes, yeah, that's in there.
Yeah.
That's what I was referring to.
Yeah.
You get back actually according to this up to 90%.
And a lot of the time it would depend on the familiarity of the municipality with the developer.
Right,
You know, if there's been experience and there's been good experience, then we're happy to facilitate future developments and release your funds back to you. But if
Yeah.
we've had bad experience or we have no clue who this person is, then we might be a little bit more cautious in terms of the release to make sure that, or if we know that the area, I mean, Peace River's got some areas where it might just be more challenging to plant and to
Yeah.
make sure that we have plants that are alive at the end of the day.
Well, that's something too. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, I know, I'll speak of an area that I know and not good, bad or indifferent, but when up at Garden Court, there was a fair amount of money put into trees at Garden Court.
Mhm.
They're dead. Not because they weren't watered, not because they weren't maintained, not because of whatever, it's just for whatever reason, they died.
Yeah.
And, that's a, that's an unfortunate situation. If you have a time period on that, and you go, well, you're gonna have to come back and build it up to the standard again, it can get fairly onerous. And I'm not talking about Garden Court specifically, but I'm saying those are realities of plants.
Yeah, not every single tree will survive when it's transplanted.
Yeah. And I could see it, person going, this is. It's really a hand always over your wallet,
Mhm.
you know?
Before I lose it, on page 113, 7928, the last clause there, you've got. Again, it's dealing with the security, 100% security landscape, but identified in section 832. 832 has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what should be there, but it's not that.
Thank you. Okay, any other thoughts on landscaping or are we moving on?
There was one thought I had here for, what about site entrance and exit, 7.19? Curb cuts and stuff like this, what happens when you've got a redevelopment on a site? There's a few of these around town, there's one where you've got. There's already a curb cut there,
Mhm.
you're no longer gonna put the garage into the house or whatever it is, if you've got an alley or something approaching. Is it then the developer's responsibility then to knock out a perfectly good piece of concrete for the sake of, or does it just fall later to be?
I think our preference would be that they would we, as a part of that development, we would be asking them to,
requesting them then.
To-
Which section is this?
7.19.
yeah.
Didn't see anything kind of like directing that, so. But there are some pretty funny ones around town. It's like, oh, there used to be a driveway here, now there's an apartment building or something, and then, but it doesn't line up with the sidewalks or anything like that. I can think of the. Which one is on the south end apartment building on the southwest side of the river, that there's like a old approach there, but there's no, like, it must have been. 50, 60 years ago when there was a house or something there that,
And then the town didn't make them,
and then there was no, yeah.
yeah,
So, I mean, the concrete's in really good shape for the age, but the, like, just why is it there? Yeah, yeah, exactly. So the state tearing it all up, just more disruption that doesn't, I don't know. Hey,
If anybody doesn't have anything before that.
what number is it?
It's 8.5.8. Cannabis cultivation, processing, distribution.
Hmm.
And again, there's a,
section reference.
yeah, wrong section. Should be 1.7, not 1.6, I believe.
Which one's that, Terry?
Um,
I'm sorry, I just couldn't hear you too well.
8.5.8, it's parking. It refers to parking for a cannabis operation. And then it references 8.16, which is recreation vehicles, so it's just the wrong reference to the wrong. Should be 8.17, not 1.6.
Oh,
Actually, I think it should be section 10, the parking requirement section. Yeah, 'cause section 8.17 is the retail cannabis
Right,
and liquor
right,
storage.
right, yeah, I see that. Then I had a question on page 129, and again, it's just the shall, should, may
Mhm.
question. Dealing with communication tower facilities should comply with federal legislation. Don't they have to? Isn't that a shall?
They shall, but we're not the authority requiring them to do that. That's why it's a should.
Yeah, but if it comes to you and it's not in compliance with them, you're not gonna approve it.
We're not gonna approve it. And for communication towers, we're actually not providing a development permit, we're providing a letter of concurrence to the feds.
So you think should is okay? Why can't you put
Who's the one
shall or
that
must?
says that goes in and stops? Is it us or is it them?
It's them.
Is that why it should? Because we don't.
I mean, I guess this is not a hill I'm gonna die on. I think
Yeah, no,
it could be a shall. Ultimately, we're providing a letter of concurrence for communication towers, not a development permit.
We don't really have the final say in whether it goes there or not. I mean, that's the kind of thing, if it push comes to shove, they shove, we back off.
Yeah, well,
well, we're not even gonna see an application until it's Do that, right?
Nope, no, that's not true. We do see an application, the federal government wants our letter of concurrence before they issue an approval. Yes, we are actually at the beginning stages of one right now. And there is consultation requirements. So the telecommunications
So in
company.
your response to this company, you're gonna say to them, you should
Mhm,
comply with the federal regulations.
mhm.
You're not gonna say, hey, you have to, because you won't know if they're gonna until it's gone.
Yeah. And I don't know that we have the understanding of the federal regulations to confirm whether or not it does.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm good with that. Okay, flip the page over, we're still on telecommunications on 130. You've got clause 8.7.5. Which to me is a direct copy of 8.7.2. Isn't that the exact same clause?
Oh, mm-hmm,
Which means your numbering from there on is gonna be wrong, so you better check if there's any references to numbering. Because one of those has to be deleted.
thank you.
You got a good eye for this kind of stuff.
I am.
On page 134, on this business minor, 8.149. D, provide sufficient on-site parking where off-street parking is not available. On-site parking where off-street parking is off-street parking not by on. Don't those two terms mean the same thing? You're providing
Oh, we're off-street.
on-site parking where off-street parking means you're parking on the site.
Thank you. Yeah, no,
Don't they both mean
we're,
the same thing?
I think it's where street parking.
Shouldn't it be as
Yeah,
in
off-site parking.
10 D? Sufficient on-site parking where on-street
Yeah.
parking is not available.
Yeah. Thank you, yes.
And 8.15.5. Now, I may be picking this part of it. It deals with proposed industrial use located adjacent to a site, yada, yada, yada. And then some of the things that you might request are relocation of parking areas. And in the next one, screening or relocating on-site lighting. Now, if this is a proposed, wouldn't you be concerned with the location of those parking areas and the location of the on-site, not relocating?
Hmm.
I think what you're implying is you're gonna get an application from these people and you might wanna have them change it because of this. But if it's the application, you're telling them what they should include. It should be in the positive sense, not the negative.
So you're taking out the word relocation?
And putting location.
Yeah.
Right.
You're concerned with the location of the parking areas.
Right.
You're not expected to
Yeah.
relocate it yet,
No,
because they
that's
haven't
fair.
built it.
I follow your logic. Any thoughts on the recreational vehicles? That's another one where we're asking, we're bringing that up to the public. This is about parking recreational vehicles in residential areas specifically. And we do have a number 2, which
Two is a lot.
It depends on your situation, it really does,
Mm-hmm.
because I live in a neighborhood in Shaftesbury where these guys built these big houses. And every one of them built a pad beside their house so that they could park their motorhome there. So in that subdivision, it looked great, because they're not impacting the neighborhood at all.
Mhm.
You go down to Lower West Peace, and a guy wants to park his motorhome that's bigger than his house there,
Yeah.
that is an impact.
Mhm.
So it's gonna be one of those things that's area specific, I think. So I don't know how you deal with that. Because like I say, there's certain areas of town where it's, sure,
Mhm.
park your motorhome and your boat and your, toy hauler and your trailer, and if you got a big enough lot, you can make it look nice and it's fine.
Well, I think part of the argument against the recreational vehicles and stuff like out on the houses is that if your house is set back X amount and the bus beside your house is a half a meter from the sidewalk, you literally, you don't have a view down the street anymore
Mhm.
at all.
You do have
Huh?
some wording around that, it does have to be within. It cannot be within X number of meters of the
Yeah,
sidewalk.
0.6 meters.
Yeah,
2 feet,
that's not, yeah.
That's like.
If-
I can still walk.
If you can still walk, but if your driveway's in your front, then yeah, you're definitely blocking the streetscape with motorhomes.
Which is, I mean, like, we're worried about putting, making
Sorry?
sure people maintain a tree out front, but like, I mean,
They can put two
RVs,
trailers in
yeah.
their yard.
and it does become a safety issue, again, I go to my brother-in-law's place and he's got his big hauler there, and I pull into his driveway beside it, and when I'm backing out, until my ass end is out in the street, I can't see around that unit.
Mhm.
When it's on his own property.
Yeah.
It's more than 2 feet from the sidewalk, but still, as I'm edging back, I'm waiting for my thing to go beep, 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 that somebody's coming, right, because you can't see it.
Mhm.
How many times have you had, how many times has town had complaints about recreational vehicles on streets? More than once. Right?
Yes, I honestly don't
Probably
think,
usually more based on the fact that it's parked on the street
Yeah.
than where it is. I
or
think
across the sidewalk
a
in
lot
some
of people might
circumstances.
not know to complain in any other way if it's like, well, it's, cause like looking at this. I don't park mine in my driveway all that often, but I also don't have other parking other than my driveway and it's single wide. So looking at this, I can't park mine on my driveway. I might still, except it's live, so now people will know to look. But a lot of people wouldn't know to complain about that because it goes on his driveway, so,
Yeah.
fine. Even though now, God,
But although, I mean, if there's, if, that's why this is here, I mean, again, it's probably like, no one's gonna go around and just start like slapping tickets on. I mean, so they could, I mean,
Yeah.
you could be direct the bylaw officer to do so, but I mean, if there isn't. If we put it in there, saying, hey, like, no vehicles out in front of, say we say, no recreational vehicles in front of a property that would obstruct the escape of the, of the street. If you put something like that in there, I mean, people are gonna do it because they don't know. No one's reading this thing when they move to town, like, it's like, oh, I gotta follow up on all the bylaws in town, and then, it's only until somebody makes a complaint or something like this, and they might go 10, 15 years until they get a neighbor who tries back up past it and gets,
French.
yeah, and then also it's like, oh, this is, and then you deal with it.
Yeah.
I don't think this is necessarily needs to be such a hot topic, as long as there's something there that the town can utilize if there's problems.
Mhm.
And this is less of a, again, if everyone on the street's friendly and happy and everyone's all doing good, then probably no one's gonna go and burn Byron's camper down, but. If he goes up and down the street every night, knocking on everyone's door, hauling them up so they can go on a booze cruise. They might get a little bit tired of that eventually.
Mhm.
I don't know, what are you guys' thoughts?
Well, I think the majority of complaints I've heard, the majority have been because of vehicles parked on the street, not so much in a person's yard.
Mhm.
And not so much in a person's yard until it's been there for a while. I
Yeah,
mean, somebody has some relatives come from wherever the heck and they pull into the driveway and they hand them a power cord and they stay for 2 or 3 days, doesn't usually cause a problem.
That's right.
Is there a way of saying, you can have kind of one, like, so to Terry's point, like, okay, so if the one that's there is parked there all the time, fine. An additional one has a restriction of like 2 weeks. Is that, or is that getting a little bit too, you know, whatever,
We're-
cause it does say 2,
Yeah,
and 2 is a lot, but I can see. The guy that has one
Sure.
and his brother-in-law. You know, parks in the driveway for a little while and, you know.
yeah, everyone's gearing up to go down the Okanagan or whatever, and they've got everything parked there for the week, and they're loading everything, getting them ready to go, you got 2 campers, you know, and it's like, yeah, but they're only there for.
Yeah,
Well, and I think that that's, like you said, if it's a sort of a one-off thing like that, it's gonna be when the guy's got his, you know, his 30-foot motorhome, and then he's got a toy hauler beside it, and
Yeah.
you know, he leaves them there for 9 months a year, because he only uses them in summer.
Yeah.
Then might make a difference, but those are the guys that should be out at storage yards, right? And typically, most, I would think,
Why are we, maybe part of it is that 0.6 meters from the front. Because do you really want somebody pulling something into their side yard that's gonna block the view of everybody down the street for? You know, I mean, if it's not the purpose, and if you, it's sort of like if you can afford to have one, there's argument you could make, if you can afford to have one, you should be able to afford to have a place to park it, right? That's why they have them big parking lots around cities and towns where there's 101 RVs parked in the thing, you know, all winter, and then summertime they're clear. But, you know, I mean, the question is, do we care enough? Is it a big enough issue? You know, what problem are we trying to solve here? You know, my biggest worry about it has always been the sight line down the street, because you really can't, now you don't enjoy your neighborhood anymore. If you have one on either side of it, you got a nice front yard, but we don't, like I said, I think I said at one meeting, we don't allow a 6-foot fence. But we'll allow an 8-foot, 10-foot motorhome.
Right.
Mhm.
What's the difference?
Especially if, yeah, if it's there all the time. It's like, yeah.
You know, what the effect is the same.
Okay, well, I think if that is the big concern, then, and I think it is really, like, that's kind of where the conversation has centered predominantly. That's the feedback. I've got it, so
Okay.
I'll take it back and think about how we might present
See if
an
other
option.
municipalities have dealt with this already.
Yeah.
Cause they probably have.
Mhm.
Yeah, and even if it said no recreational vehicles may be in this sort of a community or whatever. Again, if someone's there for a couple of days, I doubt no one's gonna. Right, it's all again,
Well, and this is about parking and storing, so if
Yeah.
someone's coming for a visit and like camping for a week on their
Right.
friends, that's not really dealing with that.
okay,
We're silent on that
right.
in this.
how do we feel about 1 instead of 2?
well, it's like Don says, one is gonna block it just as much as two. If
Yeah.
it's, you know,
Okay,
12
yeah.
feet high and 30 feet long.
Might as well too, because you can see past the first one anyways.
Mhm.
And again, it's in some communities, yeah, like you've got the, you know, if you have room for your boat and your, you know, whatever else too, right, it's not just necessarily,
Yeah.
I don't know.
And it might come back later if people start taking real advantage and we start getting complaints, and we say, you know what?
Yeah, that's right.
The reality
Well,
is,
the reality
this is
this-
new regulation, we don't have anything today,
Right,
aside from what's in the traffic
so
bylaw,
this is
so things,
more restrictive, even though it is very permissive, is more restrictive than present.
Well, we had issues with buses. I remember an issue
Yeah.
coming to council about a guy who was a school bus driver, if I remember correctly.
Mhm.
And he would park his school bus in front of the house.
Yeah.
And there was no law against it,
but that's on the street, right?
right?
Yeah,
But
so,
there's no law against it.
There
So
I think there was, and they wanted us to permit it.
Mhm.
They
Right,
couldn't do it and they wanted to be allowed to do it, and we said, no.
right.
Yeah.
So why did we say no? We said no for the reasons we don't want the
Reasons.
Yeah.
big motorhome in the side yard.
So when you're dealing with setbacks,
Mhm.
just a general question. And your terminology, and you say the subject unit is not within the prescribed setback. So if there's a 10-meter setback at the front of my property, when you say it's not within the prescribed setback, do you mean it's in that 10-foot area or it's outside of that 10-foot area?
Sorry, we're,
Oh, I'm
Where are
just,
you
I'm
reading?
looking at 8.17.3 as an example. And there's, I was just reading through this and I'm trying to wrap my head around. The subject is not within the prescribed setback where the building on the site is not within. Where the building on the site is not within the setback. So when you say within the setback, do you mean that it's in compliance with the setback and it's more than 10 feet back? Or where you say within the setback, it's within that 10 feet?
no, so the way I'm reading this clause is if you want to have a new cannabis store within, it's within 100 meters of the site of a. How do I explain this well?
Well,
I
that's
think,
what I'm
I
trying
think
to-
I want to point to a map because I sure think that will help.
Do we have a drawing for this someplace or?
I don't think we do.
standard? No, you're not to this specific.
Yeah, yeah, but what did that happen there? Interesting. So what this means to me is if this was a park,
Yeah,
you guys can see,
Yeah.
okay, that was a park and someone wanted to do a cannabis store on this property, the property is within 100 meters, but the actual unit that they want to put the retail store is outside of that.
okay, but again, I guess it's just wrapping my head around negatives and
Mhm.
where you say the subject unit is not within the prescribed setback. So when you say it's not within a prescribed setback.
Yeah.
That means there's a 100-meter setback. This building or whatever it is not in that 100 meters.
The building is within, so
No,
the corner,
Okay, so
yeah,
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I'm just within or outside is
Mhm.
what I'm trying to differentiate.
so the unit is outside of the setback, but the building is within the setback. So the setback is capturing the corner of the building.
No, but that's, yeah, but I'm just using it in general
Okay,
terms.
okay.
General terms.
Yeah.
I got something here, here's a park, I wanna build something here,
Mhm.
there's a setback between these two that says I can't build here unless it's 10 meters. And then it goes into saying it's not within the prescribed setback. So does that mean the prescribed setback is this and it's not within that?
Think so.
That's what I think so.
Yes.
I think so too. That helps you.
So if it's not within that prescribed setback, that would imply it's outside of it.
Mhm.
So you can build
Oh,
outside of it and not within it.
Yes, as long as
So
your
you're
physical
talking
unit
about
is
a
outside.
multi-unit,
Well, I'm just using that as an example. I just pulled that and I saw it and
Right.
I'm just trying to get in my head. The building with multiple units and the subject unit is not within the prescribed setback, whereas the building on the site is within. So part of it is in, part of it's out.
but not-
You can build on the part that's out, but not on the part that's in.
well, I think what they're talking about is like, for example, the building that Laverne has up by Boston Pizza.
Yeah.
The Laverne Strip.
Yeah,
The air cadet, the air
Yes.
cadet unit may be a no. But H&R Block might be an okay, because H&R Block, even though you could call it one building or one structure, H&R Block is outside the 100 yards. Or outside the distance, am I correct? So it's within a multi-unit structure
Mhm.
that if the first building closest is too close, but the last unit, pardon me, not building, if the first unit is close, is too close, and the last unit is far enough, then you can
do it.
say okay to the last one.
Yeah,
Even
That would
even
be
though
the
the
intent.
address for the building
Huh?
is, you're saying,
Yeah.
okay, this whole building is this address, say it's got one address for some reason. but
Yeah.
One unit is outside. Well,
One unit, and that unit would be okay because it's far enough away.
yes,
The fact that it's kind of it's kind of a duplex, quadplex, whatever,
Mhm.
strip mall.
Yeah.
And any strip mall would fall into that. The closest unit might not be okay and the last unit might be okay.
Mhm.
Okay. That's the way I read it, Terry. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's, I think I get it. So on the next page, stripping, filling, excavation, grading. 8.1, 8.19.3B. You're talking about bringing material into a site. And you have a description of the proposed source of the material. Shouldn't you be asking for a description of the material and the proposed source? Like, why do you wanna know?
Hmm.
I'm gonna do some landfill, I'm gonna get my material at a gravel pit. Okay, but when do you bring it?
fair enough.
Well, no, I'm getting it there, so that's all I have to tell you.
Yeah,
Should be the material. And if you care where they get it, I'm not sure why. You know, unless it's on site and they're moving material from here to here,
Mhm.
but if they're bringing stuff in,
and if you're wondering, cause I mean, that's like a really deep rabbit hole you start going down. Cause you start going, oh, well, where did you get it from? And you start asking those questions. And what if someone say, oh, I got it from this location, well, that location used to be a gas station. Oh, is that, do you want to be asking all those questions? Is that really within our, you know, because if then you're starting to put in a whole bunch of red tape potentially.
Well, yeah, but you may want to know.
Yeah, you might, but that's why I'm asking the question, is that if you're. is
so
this-
I mean, and it states that, you know, basically, if you want to know that, which is what it says.
Yeah.
You want a description of the material, is what I would say, and the proposed source of that material. So I'm gonna get some backfill.
I think
Yeah.
that's a reasonable request.
Yeah.
Because if I was gonna get it from, as you say, from the, if I was just gonna move the stuff from from the old gas station site and use it as a
Filled for my
fill on a
yard.
new one, and you go, well, how'd you get rid of all that old land? Don't ask, I just moved it over here a block away to my new building because, you know, so I think that's reasonable. I
Yeah.
think that's exactly what you're trying to protect against.
Yeah, exactly.
But
I wasn't sure if that was totally getting captured there, in that.
Anybody have any questions about signs? Signs are always fun.
About which?
Signs, there's a whole section here on signs of various,
I do want to just let everybody know that I took this particular section out of the bylaw and sent it directly to the 3 sign companies that are in our community.
have they reviewed that? Or you haven't heard?
I haven't heard. I've spoken to one of them.
Okay.
And he provided some very minor.
Yeah.
Feedback.
Yeah, I looked through these things too, and I mean, we do have a sign bylaw of sorts now, right?
Mhm. Yeah, there's a sign section in the land use bylaw. This
Yeah.
is trying
And
to make it
I
better.
didn't see anything here that is really new or
No, I didn't.
people are gonna get overly excited about. Again, your little chart is always helpful.
I think historically, my memory is the sign bylaw came up a couple of times when I was on council. One of them was for an overhanging sign that was not really structurally good.
Well, there's. a
And the
couple-
other one, or questionable, and the other one was, and another one was for a big balloon on top of the A&W. The
Mm.
third one was for, the third one that came up was and it was controversial as hell. Does anybody know where the visitor information sign is, what you can see from the highway?
Mhm.
It's a little white one by the train station.
Yep.
And
Big
the
question.
scrap over that was unbelievable at the time.
The file is an interesting read. I've seen materials related to that in the files. It's interesting.
Yeah, so those are the ones where, that I remember where it came up. Where people really were, the A&W one was another one, where they were gonna put a big bear on top, I think it was a rubber bear or something on top, I can't remember, it was inflatable of some kind. On top of the A&W downtown, and it just was like, no, yes, no, yes. So I don't know how this bylaw,
Well, it does address the.
It does,
It does address
inflatable
that
signs are there,
specifically,
yeah.
and how it has to be fastened in the cap.
so are you gonna make it a sign bylaw a separate entity?
No, it's section 9 of this bylaw.
And it.
Okay.
So might we repeal the other one?
It's a part of the land use
It's
bylaw.
part of the other, it is.
Yeah.
When
It
we were,
was separate and then we moved it in there a few years
It's
back,
on its
right?
own thing.
yeah, no, it's not its own
Okay,
thing.
very good.
Sorry.
It was separate at one time, was it not, when we rolled it into the land use bylaw,
I honestly don't know.
I believe.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's possible, but.
Yeah.
Parking.
Oh, we vary that all the time.
We do vary it all the time. So one of the things that this is doing is,
That's one of the ones where you guys are gonna be able to make the call, yes,
for variances.
for parking. Yeah, like that, isn't that one of the things that you want to bring here less?
Yeah, so what we've done, a couple of things, currently in our bylaw, we do allow for credit for on-street parking in the downtown area, but not anywhere else. So we do make it here, for any commercial or public use where there's on-street parking that abuts the frontage of the property, then that on-street parking can be counted towards the parking requirement. So that's everywhere now instead of just downtown.
I found the title for on page 155 of the 10-2-13. No parking required on Main Street.
Oh, yeah, that's not a great title. Thank you.
No parking restrictions or something, maybe, whatever, that's kind of a funny title.
Yeah, and then that's the other thing that we're doing, notwithstanding the title needs a bit of work, but for some specific areas of the
So-
downtown.
You've also got something there in that first thing there, except in development of dwelling units is required on along. It's like you were deciding whether it was on or along the following roads.
Oh, yeah, thank you. But the moral of the story is along Main Street from.
Yeah, yeah.
From Boston Pizza Corner down to the end. No parking is required for any use except for a dwelling unit or visitor accommodation development. And then also on 102nd Ave. We've got a typo on the street, 106th Street. And then on 101st Street as well and 99th Street. So a large portion of the downtown, we wouldn't require on-site parking. And so there would be no variance that would come to the MPC because there wouldn't be a parking requirement.
Yep.
And then we've got use tables and it's been a challenge sometimes because we're not sure which use or which category for the parking the use fits under. So now if it's a listed use, it's got a parking requirement. A lot of them are the same. And they've been slightly rounded up. So a lot of them are similar, but as we've gone to metric, we've gone up in terms of, I guess, requiring less parking than more parking. And then there are some uses where it's not applicable, so there is no parking requirement for some specific uses, like agricultural operations.
So these minimum requirements are already in place?
Yes, we have minimum parking requirements. It's just that they weren't as listed out.
Right.
Some of it would be any other use, that's not one of the ones that's listed, it's this, and so then it was
You
kind of
just
captured
listed
in
a
all.
whole bunch of other uses.
Yeah, all the uses that are defined and listed in the bylaw are in these tables.
Do I end up with 1.5? Do you round that up to 2?
Yes, you always round up. Yeah, you'll often, when you do the math, we'll end up with fractional parking requirements, so we do round up. Okay, then I also want to talk about parking space. How are we doing for time? Okay, we're very close to 6. Then, if, nobody needs to go to a cornhole tournament
No,
today.
I let them know I won't be there today.
Oh, did you?
But parking surface requirements, so the language has been updated a little bit. To make it explicit that we can vary. This this requirement for a change of occupancy permit or an accessory building development
Where are
permit. So
you?
I'm on 10.3.3 on page 157. So. It's the last sentence of that regulation and then similar addition to 10.3.4 and 10.3.5. Because we've been having that conversation a lot, and I guess the question is, when do we want to trigger that requirement for paving, especially in circumstances where the site is existing?
Yeah,
So the rationale here is, if it's a change of occupancy permit, okay, they're just going and using the existing building, the existing site. We don't trigger the hard surfacing requirement. If they're doing an addition to the building, that doesn't apply.
That's the trigger, right?
Yeah, so you are actually building more on the site, so then we are going to require that parking lot be upgraded. Now, I mean, thinking back to the permits that we've dealt with, where we've dealt with this issue, the daycare, for instance. There, we are ending up with, I mean, they've paved the front portion already, and they're going to pave the rest of that parking lot within the next few years, so. And in that case, I do think it's a good thing, because it's gonna be a full parking lot.
Yeah. They're gonna be using it. And I think when we denied something there previously, did we not? When they wanted to use something, it was because it was regarding, we wanted them to upgrade or no, we didn't deny, we said they had to have it paved. That's what it was for that same location.
We,
Thought it was around drawings and stuff.
yeah, we didn't
Yeah,
deny it, but we asked for
didn't
better
have enough
information,
detail.
Oh, okay.
and it turned out
That's
to be
what
a
it was?
a
Okay.
good choice.
Okay. Cause yeah, I remember like one of the things like we talked about at that point, it's like, yeah, they've got a bunch of gravel in the back and they're tracking out into the street and stuff
Yeah.
like this. So it is a really good, important thing.
well, and the other point of that was whether they had rear access or not. That
Mhm.
parking area, right?
Oh, yeah. Which they-
Yeah.
I think it was, we had requirements. And it was, we issue the permit with requirements, or we say, go get the drawing and then come back.
Show us what you're gonna actually do.
Yeah.
and then-
Yeah.
Cause I was like, I'll let him do it, and you're like, I wanna see it on the paper.
Yeah.
So, fair enough.
More.
So I guess like my desire is for feedback on that, like, have we gone far enough with this? Does this make sense? Enough?
Well, the parking a lot of times comes. It's one of those things that hits like shrubbery and landscaping, and that is that I've got X amount of money to build what I want to build. And your parking requirements are gonna make it really difficult for me to achieve what I want to achieve, right?
Mhm.
And that comes up, I think, a fair amount. So I think it's good to have it there and the ability to negotiate.
Mhm.
And to have it brought back, because there are happy mediums. You know, it's. So I think it's reasonable the way it is, given that you're trying to achieve something. I mean, I take a look at, not in the same way I take a look at sidewalks. A lot of shopping areas in town have really bad sidewalks in their area. There's no real way to walk around this shopping environment. You wouldn't get that in the city. You know, so, and it's the same with some parking. There are happy mediums, there are things you can do and.
Yeah.
It works.
And there's, there's things in here that allow for, you know, if you can't provide the parking here, then we will allow you to put a parking lot within whatever it is, 100 meters. And there's good examples of that in this town.
Yeah.
Where guys develop an area for parking. Because they have to, because the bylaw says, and I have never seen a vehicle parked there.
Well, Boston Pizza was,
Boston Pizza is a good one.
Boston Pizza was
Yeah.
one, not for the one parking across the street, but the parking
Block
behind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, you get stuff like that and the guy says, well, okay, if I gotta shell out, you know, and buy that empty lot and put my sign on it and tell people they can go park there. Okay, I'll do it.
Well, and that's one where, I mean, this bylaw is going to mean that Boston Pizza doesn't need
Doesn't need that.
that, so after this bylaw is adopted, I'd like to
There's gonna be a for sale.
let them know that,
Yeah.
you know, maybe I think that officially we might have to reissue the development permit with that updated parking approval.
Right.
But then I think they would do, maybe. I think so.
Generally,
Because
from
the permit that they have is subject to that parking requirement,
Right.
that parking being provided,
Yeah,
so,
take the paperwork.
yeah. But then that would be a easy one to do, it'd be permitted use.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, and then tell them, you know, we'd love to see that site redeveloped, so feel free to think
Are
about
there others?
other
Or is that-
purposes.
Is that the one I don't know of? Are there others?
I think there is,
There's one down on River Road there where they park across the street. It's must be for Kelly's restaurant, I would think.
well, that across the street is a public parking lot that the town owns.
Yeah, but they didn't incorporate that into theirs because it was there, right? It was
We-
basically made a parking area.
We allowed them to incorporate that and count their parking.
Yeah, we allowed the variance on the parking for the, it
Based
was
on
required,
the fact that they could use that.
yeah, based on the presence of that public parking lot, so near so
So
close
it
by.
wasn't a parking lot that it really has, right? It's,
So we made it one, but it was always a town piece of property.
yes.
Yeah.
So I have a general question when we get into part four administration, just on the first page there, 11.1.5. Any variance more than 10% of the received to MPC, is that still true? Is that still around 10%? Variances
Is that still the,
case? Yes.
it
There's
is,
nothing that you've changed that's gonna impact that, other than you've taken some things out that don't come to us. So
Mhm.
they don't require, with 10%, up to 10% administration, you know, but above 10%, so that's still the same.
that is the same.
Okay, that's all I'm asking.
Yeah.
I like that.
And that's always been in place.
Although, actually, it's a little bit different now. Sorry, can you remind me where we are?
Page 163.
11.1.5.
So the difference, I think, between what is today and what is proposed is that in the current bylaw, there's some very specific numerical regulations that are within the 10% and development officer has the authority, and beyond that, we don't. So now this is making it more blanket, any numerical.
Anything that comes up with numerical value that,
Regardless
you
of
guys-
what it is.
like, oh, it's trimmed the corner a little bit here.
Mhm.
It gives you guys the ability to not have to.
Bring it to the
Which is
MPC.
great.
Yeah,
Because
yeah. So it's a little bit more expansive. But beyond that, it's still keeping that 10%.
But it also gives you the ability to say no.
Yes,
Either way, I mean, you can say I have it, but I don't think it's a good idea.
Mhm.
Well, if they don't like it, then they'll kick it to us.
Sorry,
If they don't like it, then they would kick it to us.
then they would kick it to us, absolutely, but. Sober.
Well, does it say that?
Yep, no, it doesn't.
It gives us the option. The
They always
bylaw
have
gives
the-
us the option.
Yeah,
They don't wanna make a decision. I would say.
Yeah. but I mean, like, is there? Is it wise to leave that open for, should it be automatic then if it's? That it goes to the MPC, should we leave or should,
They're still asking for a variance, so it's still gotta be justified.
that's right,
It's just a small variance.
that's right.
It just falls on the employee that the town has hired to maintain.
But what I'm saying is though, is then if the employee or that officer says no,
Yes,
well, then it's just a no and it doesn't actually get sent to the MPC.
Well, they can appeal, you can always appeal.
yeah,
But I just wondering, like, should there be a little bit of a, just so that there isn't like a, a hard piece of red tape in there that might be unnecessary. It's like, and even if it comes to MPC, it just, that way it's baked in the system. People aren't coming back going, oh, the town says no, 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 all the time. It'd be like, if, it might be something absolutely ridiculous and you're like, there's no way they're gonna be able to do this. But if, at least if it automatically codes here, when it's a no, at least then, it's like, we're gonna do it, at least that individual can go, we're gonna do everything we can for you. Because it's gonna go to the MPC.
well, I think they're advised, are they not? In most cases, I mean, the ethical thing to do would be to say, my decision is no, however, you have a right of appeal and here it is.
But then you're adding one more step into it.
Well, it is, but it's also,
But they're not gonna say no unless there's a very good reason. I mean.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's gonna be justified, and if the guy, he says, well, you didn't do this, and the guy says, no, I don't want to. I just want the variance.
Yeah.
Then you can say, no, that's not a good reason.
yeah,
Okay, yeah.
I don't want it, it's not a good
Yeah.
reason.
I don't think that you're trying to solve a problem that actually exists, Tyrell.
Okay.
I'm gonna roll over a page or two. There's a part there that deals with your
Notices? Is that what you?
reviewing the development of officer's decision. Board within 14, and then in brackets, you got 21 days. 14 or 21, what do we do? One or the other?
What she talking about?
Oh, it's just a.
One sixty-six, top right box.
166, yeah,
Oh, appealing the development?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for noticing that.
And then we had this discussion the other day about whether or not notification. Under the approval of the green law, you got development permit, the notice board is posted on site. Are we still posting notice boards? I thought you said getting away from those.
We are, where are we referencing that?
Approval in the green,
Mhm.
the notice board is posted on site. The development permit is granted and the notice board is posted.
Sorry,
You don't see
which
that?
page are you on?
The chart,
166.
Oh, sorry, I flipped.
the green blocks.
Oh,
So are we
Thank you.
using notice boards
No.
or no?
no,
So that's gonna come out.
yes, it needs to be updated to be consistent with the proposed new approval
Right.
or notification practices.
Appropriate notice is given, kind of thing.
Would it be a good idea? It's just a question. Green means approved, correct? Effectively on that chart. And maybe there has to be a different color for those two coming out of the boxes because they're approved. How would I put it there? You got a positive result with your appeal, right? So approved after appeal. And you had the no, you got the approved after appeal.
Mhm.
You got the no, you got the approved after appeal. That clarifies, it's kind of like a secondary, a yes after the no. But I think that if you change that color, and I don't know if there's, maybe it's some, you think of a word or because the no triggered the appeal and the no triggers the second appeal.
Mhm.
The yeses after that. I think it needs a bit more
But I mean, the green, the
Clarification.
green arrow is all the way down the chart, just.
Sorry?
I'll spend some time with this diagram. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna. I didn't spend very much time with this diagram, so I,
Take a
yeah.
look at it.
good news.
So the whole subdivision appeal process is pretty standard as to what we already exists, right? This is just reiterating it from the way I read it.
Mhm.
Haven't changed any penalties.
We have changed penalties. When we're talking about the values, we have scaled values up so that they are actually covering costs to the admin and making them enough that they are somewhat,
Public deterrent.
yes, exactly.
Fees or just park your RV where you want.
Yes, exactly. And we did have our new director of protective services. He took a boo at this enforcement section. And he seemed pleased with its content.
What's his background? If you might be asking.
17 years of.
Is that door at the bottom of the stairs locked?
There's a good chance Randa did lock it on her way out. But there's a good chance Randa did lock it on her way out, but she did not message me to say that this time, so I'm not 100%.
I've got to go to my car and then come back, so.
Okay.
Stick a boot in the door.
I'm sorry?
Stick a boot in the door.
Don't do that, but give me, it's very easy to unlock and lock, so.
Well, I've got my little tag thing. Should I lock it? Should it not? My little, should.
Yes, it should.
Okay.
Yeah. You've got cell phones?
I've got my phone
Yeah.
here. That's the shit. Back in a few minutes.
I believe he's also done his own private security company for a time. And
I was thinking more on the final education and municipal law. So we're obviously what he's enforcing.
Yes. I mean, I never got to see his resume, so I'm not 100% sure, but I do know he's come from Valley View and he
Right.
was
Right,
in bylaw enforcement there. And
okay,
he's got municipal experience and
right.
the conversation,
That was my
Yeah.
question.
the conversations that I've had. Yes, there's someone who's taking this on and it's,
Good.
he knows what the requirements are for following that process.
Get all my little notes.
I was prepared for more, Terry. That's actually not that bad.
And we got one the other day. Yeah. Like I said, I think overall the document is good. A few tweaks, but. So, we thought of it well, I think. Certainly made it a lot easier to wrap your head around. What we're asking for and when. I guess that was the purpose. Good job.
Clarifies things, lift some restrictions in certain areas and hopefully hopefully that there's some sort of a mandate or something to take a review of it again in 6 months or a year or something, just to see how it's actually doing.
Usually 5 years if the review is it not by our supposed to be reviewed 5
I
years.
think you're thinking of some of the other planning documents, which we really need to work on. Coming, I mean, the land use bylaw is a living document and
Yes.
I expect amendments, like this is good. But it's not perfect and it also isn't a crystal ball into the future, so I'm sure that there are things that are coming that we haven't thought of.
Right.
So we'll have to do amendments. There will be amendments in the same way there's amendments to this one. hopefully won't need to be as many, but that they will come, and there probably will need to be within 6 months to a year, fixing the things we've noticed since we started using it.
Right.
Amendment that we'll want to bring forward.
Have you kind of previewed the results from the survey so far?
And that's,
When is the survey active?
closing on the 7th, or that's,
Oh, yeah.
that's the cutoff. And then I'm gonna start looking at it and preparing to bring out that information to council. So
The community seem to be catching your vision.
there, overall, for the things that we were pointing out in the survey, there's not a lot of disagreement. Obviously, you're not getting everybody, but a strong majority for most of the changes are agreeing with them. With a couple of exceptions where it's a little more split, but there's none where it's like everybody's disagreeing with the change. That's not what I'm seeing at all. So that's nice.
Are you seeing anybody address issues that weren't the changes you highlighted? The document is out there and it's been
Yeah.
sent out to various groups.
There was a question and my goal is to go through and provide some, like, these are the questions, here are some answers. There was one related to parking paving requirements.
Right.
So that is one for sure. That's the one that's sticking out in my mind right now.
Yes. Is there anything else we need to discuss? Are you happy with wrapping this?
Mhm.
Okay, I will adjourn the meeting. Yes, we're still at 6:18.